The applause echoed through the grand ballroom as my younger brother accepted another family award. I sat quietly at the back table, unnoticed. Then my father grabbed the microphone. He looked directly at me and said, "I only have one son. The other one has been a disappointment since the day he was born." The room fell completely silent. My mother lowered her head. No one defended me. I slowly stood up, picked up my coat, and smiled. Then I said the words they would never forget. "From this moment on, consider me a stranger. The day you need me most, remember that you chose this." I walked out without looking back. For 7 years, I never called. Never visited. Never asked for anything. While they celebrated my brother, I built a company worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Then one cold November morning, my father's business collapsed. The banks froze every account. The family house was about to be auctioned. And the only person who could save them was the son they had buried in their hearts years ago. But forgiveness has a price. The first time my father told me I meant nothing to him, I was only 9 years old. My name is Ethan Carter, and I grew up in a wealthy family in Boston. From the outside, we looked perfect. A beautiful house. Luxury cars. Private schools. Family vacations that looked flawless in photographs. But behind those smiling pictures, there was a son who never felt loved. My younger brother, Ryan, was my father's pride. If Ryan scored a B, Dad bought him a new bicycle. When I earned straight A's, he only asked, why wasn't every score perfect? No matter how hard I worked, I was never enough. As I grew older, things became worse. Ryan learned that lying made him everyone's favorite. Whenever something broke, it became my fault. Whenever money disappeared, everyone looked at me. Whenever there was an argument, my father never asked for the truth. He simply pointed at me. Ethan did it. And everyone believed him. Even my mother. She rarely defended me anymore. Sometimes she looked like she wanted to. But she stayed silent. That silence hurt even more than my father's words. By the time I turned 18, I had stopped expecting love. The only thing keeping me going was college. I earned a full scholarship to one of the best universities in America. For the first time, I believed my father might finally be proud of me. I couldn't have been more wrong. Graduation day arrived 4 years later. The ballroom was filled with families taking photos. Parents hugged their children. Some cried with happiness. I stood there holding my diploma, looking around for my family. They were late. Almost an hour late. But they finally walked in. Not because they wanted to celebrate me. They had come because Ryan wanted to network with wealthy parents. That evening, our relatives organized a family dinner to celebrate my graduation. More than 80 people attended. Aunts, uncles, cousins, business partners. Everyone congratulated me. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. Then my father stood up. He picked up the microphone. The room became quiet. He smiled. But it wasn't a proud smile. It was the same cold smile I had known my entire life. He cleared his throat and said, "Everyone keeps congratulating Ethan. But let me tell you something. A college degree doesn't make a man." People exchanged confused glances. He continued, "I've spent 22 years trying to turn this boy into someone respectable. I failed." A few people laughed awkwardly. My stomach tightened. Then came the sentence that shattered everything. He looked directly into my eyes and said, "As far as I'm concerned, you're dead to me." The room froze. No one moved. No one spoke. I looked toward my mother. Tears filled her eyes. But she said nothing. Ryan stood beside Dad, smirking. At that moment, I realized something. I wasn't losing my family. I had never truly had one. I slowly stood up. The chair scraped across the floor. Every eye followed me. I picked up my coat, walked toward my father, stopped just a few feet away, and smiled. Then I quietly said, "From today, your wish is granted. Pretend I never existed. But when the day comes that you need me, remember that you buried your own son while he was still alive." Without another word, I walked out. Behind me, the entire ballroom remained silent. None of us knew. That would be the last night our family would ever be together. The cold night air hit my face as I stepped outside the ballroom. Inside, people were still frozen. Outside, it felt as if my old life had ended. I stood beside my beat-up Honda, staring at the graduation gown folded over my arm. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Instead, it became the day I lost my family. My phone buzzed. It W. As my mother. I watched it ring until it stopped. A minute later, another message appeared. "Please don't hate us." I smiled sadly. For 22 years, she had watched everything happen. She never stopped it. Silence had become her choice. I deleted the message. Then I drove away. That night, I rented the cheapest motel room I could find. The room smelled of old paint and damp carpet. I had exactly $486 left in my bank account. No family. No home. No job. Only a college degree. And one promise. Standing in front of the cracked bathroom mirror, I looked at my own reflection. My eyes were swollen from holding back tears. I whispered, "One day, they'll hear my name from someone else. Not because I'm their son, but because I became impossible to ignore." The next morning, reality hit harder than grief. I started applying for jobs. Every interview seemed promising. Until employers asked about references. My father owned one of Boston's largest construction companies. Everyone knew him. Without telling me, he had already called several business owners. One interviewer finally admitted the truth. "Mr. Carter, your father advised us not to hire you. He said you were dishonest." I couldn't even be angry. I simply thanked him. And walked away. Weeks turned into months. I worked wherever I could. Warehouse shifts. Night security. Food delivery. Cleaning office buildings after midnight. Some days I slept only 3 hours. Every paycheck disappeared into rent and student loans. But I refused to quit. Because every difficult day reminded me. Failure would prove my father right. And that was something I would never allow. One rainy evening, while delivering food to a downtown office tower, I noticed something unusual. A young CEO was arguing with his software team. Their entire ordering system had crashed. Employees looked terrified. Without thinking, I quietly said, "I think I know what's wrong." Everyone turned to stare at the delivery driver. The CEO frowned. "You know software?" I nodded. College hadn't only taught me business. I'd spent 4 years teaching myself coding at night. The CEO folded his arms. "You've got 15 minutes. If I failed, I'd leave in embarrassment. If I succeeded, everything might change." I walked over to the computer, took a deep breath, and began typing. Exactly 12 minutes later, the screens came back to life. Orders started flowing again. The office erupted in applause. The CEO looked at me, then slowly smiled. "What's your name?" "Ethan Carter." He reached into his pocket, handed me his business card, and said something that would change my life forever. "Don't deliver my dinner tomorrow. Come help me build my company instead." As I looked at the card in my hand, I had no idea. This meeting was the first step toward becoming the man my fat her said I could never be. The business card simply read, Daniel Brooks, founder and CEO, Nexa Systems. There was no fancy speech. No promises. Just one sentence. Be at my office tomorrow morning. 8 sharp. I barely slept that night. For months. Every door had been slammed in my face. Now, someone was opening one. At exactly 7:30 the next morning, I stood outside Nexa Systems wearing my only suit. It wasn't expensive. I had bought it secondhand for $60. But it was clean. Pressed. And it was all I had. The receptionist smiled. "Mr. Brooks is waiting for you." Daniel's office overlooked the Boston skyline. He didn't waste time. "Why are you delivering food with a business degree and software skills?" I hesitated. Then I told him everything. Not every painful detail. Just enough. When I finished, he remained silent for almost a minute. Finally, he leaned forward. "Ethan, I've built companies for 25 years. I can teach skills. What I can't teach is character. Last night you could have ignored us. Instead, you helped strangers without asking for anything in return." He slid a contract across the table. Junior software analyst. Salary. Almost 4 times what I was earning from 3 part-time jobs combined. I stared at the paper. For the first time in months, hope returned. The next 2 years became the hardest, and best, years of my life. While everyone else left at 5, I stayed until midnight. I learned everything. Programming. Finance. Marketing. Negotiation. Leadership. Whenever Daniel traveled, he took me with him. Not because I was the smartest person in the room, but because he trusted me. One evening, after a long meeting, he looked at me and smiled. "Do you know why you're different?" I shook my head. He replied, "Because you remember what it feels like to be invisible. Those people make the best leaders." Meanwhile, back home, my father's construction empire was beginning to crack. Ryan had become vice president. He spent money like it would never run out. Luxury cars. Private jets. Lavish parties. Projects were delayed. Clients quietly walked away. But my father refused to believe his favorite son could make mistakes. Instead, he blamed everyone else. 3 years later, Nexa Systems landed the biggest government technology contract in company history. News channels covered it for weeks. Business magazines printed photos of Daniel Brooks. Standing beside him was me. The quiet young executive nobody recognized. Except one person. My mother. That evening, my phone rang for the first time in years. Her name appeared on the screen. I stared at it. It rang. Stopped. Then rang again. Finally, I answered. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then I heard her trembling voice. "Ethan, I've missed you every single day." I closed my eyes. There was still love in her voice. But there was also regret. Before I could answer, she whispered something that made my heart race. "Your father's company is falling apart. And Ryan has done something terrible." Those words changed everything. Because I knew. This wasn't just a family problem anymore. It was the beginning of a secret that would shake the entire Carter empire. I drove to the small coffee shop where my mother wanted to meet. She looked older than I remembered. The confident woman who had once hosted charity galas now sat alone in a corner, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. When she saw me, tears filled her eyes. "Ethan. I'm so sorry." I nodded politely. "I didn't come here for an apology. I came because you said Ryan did something terrible." She took a deep breath. Then slid a thick envelope across the table. Inside were copies of contracts, bank statements, and fake invoices. I flipped through the pages. The numbers didn't make sense. Millions of dollars had disappeared. Finally, I looked up. "What is this?" She whispered. "Ryan has been stealing from the company for almost 3 years." My heart skipped a beat. He created fake subcontractors. He approved payments to companies that don't even exist. Almost $40 million is gone. I stared at her. "And Dad doesn't know?" She slowly shook her head. "He refuses to believe Ryan could ever betray him. He thinks the business is failing because of the economy." I leaned back in my chair. For years, my father had called me the dishonest son, the failure, the embarrassment. Yet the son he trusted most was quietly destroying everything he had spent 40 years building. Life had a strange way of revealing the truth. Before leaving, my mother reached for my hand. "Please, save your father." I gently pulled my hand away. I begged him to love me. He chose Ryan. I begged you to believe me. You stayed silent. I'm not responsible for fixing the family that pushed me away. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Then she quietly nodded. As I walked away, I heard her crying behind me. But I didn't turn around. 2 weeks later, the news exploded. Carter Construction had officially defaulted on several major projects. Banks froze their credit lines. Suppliers demanded immediate payment. Employees began quitting every day. Business channels called it one of the fastest corporate collapses in Boston's history. At Nexa Systems, Daniel watched the news on the conference room television. He looked at me. "That's your family's company, isn't it?" I answered calmly. "It used to be." Daniel was silent for a moment. Then he smiled. "Interesting." "What?" "Our biggest competitor just became available." I frowned. He continued. "If Carter Construction goes bankrupt, we can buy their technology division for pennies." The room fell silent. The irony wasn't lost on me. The company my father had once hoped to leave to Ryan might soon belong to the son he had disowned. 3 days later, my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't my mother. It was my father. For 7 years, he had never called. I stared at the screen. His name kept flashing. Finally, I answered. There was no greeting. No apology. Only a tired, broken voice. "Ethan. I need your help." I closed my eyes. For years, I had imagined hearing those words. I thought they would make me feel victorious. Instead, they only made me feel sad. I took a slow breath and asked quietly. "Tell me something first. When you stood in front of everyone and said I was dead to you, did you ever believe there would come a day when I'd be the only person left who could save you?" On the other end of the line, there was only silence. For nearly a minute, neither of us spoke. I could hear my father breathing on the other end of the line. The man whose voice had once filled every room with confidence now sounded exhausted. Finally, he whispered. "No. I never thought that day would come." I closed my eyes. Neither did I. He swallowed hard. "Can we meet?" After a long pause, I answered. "Tomorrow. 9 o'clock." My office. The next morning. The receptionist called me. "Mr. Carter is here." I looked through the glass wall. For a moment, I barely recognized him. His expensive suits were gone. His shoulders were bent. His hair had turned almost completely white. It was as if 10 years had passed in only a few months. I told the receptionist, "Send him in." He slowly walked into my office. His eyes scanned the room. The floor-to-ceiling windows. The awards. The framed magazine cover with my photograph. Finally, his eyes stopped on me. For the first time in my life. My father looked nervous. He quietly said, "You've done well." I simply nodded. "Sit down." He placed a folder on my desk. "The banks will seize everything by Friday. Over 2,000 employees will lose their jobs. Families who have worked with us for decades will suffer." Then, for the first time in my entire life, my father said the words I had waited years to hear. "I was wrong about you." The room became silent. Those 5 words had once meant everything to me. Now, they felt strangely empty. I opened the folder. The situation was worse than I expected. The company wasn't just in debt. It had been looted from the inside. Ryan had hidden millions through fake companies. Luxury homes. Private investments. Offshore accounts. Everything pointed back to him. I closed the file. "Where's Ryan?" My father's face fell. "He disappeared 2 weeks ago. No one knows where he is." I stood and walked toward the window. Looking over the city, Ly spoke. "You know what's ironic? When I was 18, you told everyone I would destroy this family. But I wasn't the son you needed to fear." Behind me, I heard him quietly crying. It was the first time I had ever seen my father break. "Can you save the company?" he asked without looking up. I turned around. "Yes." Hope returned to his eyes. But I wasn't finished. "On one condition." He nodded immediately. "Anything." I slid a prepared document across the desk. He looked down. Then froze. The title read, "Transfer of Ownership, Carter Construction." His hands began to shake. "You want the company?" I looked directly into his eyes. "No. I want to save the employees. I want to protect the families who did nothing wrong. But the man who destroyed his own son will never control this company again." A tear rolled down his cheek. Slowly, he picked up the pen, signed every page, and pushed the documents back toward me. In that single moment, the empire he had spent 40 years building became mine. Not through revenge. Not through inheritance. But through the consequences of his own choices. As he stood to leave, he stopped at the door. Without turning around, he asked one final question. "Ethan, do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me?" I looked at the signed papers on my desk. Then at the man who had once called me dead. I answered quietly. "Saving your company was a business decision. Forgiveness is something you'll have to earn." He lowered his head and walked away. Little did either of us know that Ryan had just landed back in Boston. And he wasn't coming home to apologize. He was coming back to take everything. For 2 weeks, everything moved at lightning speed. The newspapers called it the biggest corporate rescue in Boston's history. Ethan Carter saves 2,000 jobs. Youngest CEO takes control of Carter Construction. People praised me for saving the company. But they didn't know the truth. I wasn't trying to save a business. I was trying to protect innocent families. The first thing I did as CEO surprised everyone. I canceled every executive bonus. Sold the luxury company jets. Auctioned the expensive cars. The money wasn't used to reward executives. It was used to pay workers who hadn't received their salaries for months. Construction crews applauded when their paychecks finally arrived. One elderly employee stopped me in the parking lot. With tears in his eyes, he said, "Your grandfather hired me 40 years ago. I thought I'd lose my pension. Thank you, son." That one word. Son. It meant more to me than every compliment I'd ever received. 3 weeks later. Forensic accountants completed their investigation. The numbers were horrifying. Ryan hadn't stolen $40 million. He had stolen almost $83 million. He had used fake companies. Forged signature. ES. And bribed 2 senior executives. The FBI officially opened a criminal investigation. Every airport received his photograph. But Ryan had vanished. No one knew where he was. One rainy evening, my assistant knocked on my office door. "Mr. Carter. There's someone here who refuses to leave." "Who?" She hesitated. "Your brother." I slowly stood up. After 7 years. Ryan was back. He walked into my office wearing designer clothes. An expensive watch. And the same arrogant smile I remembered. He looked around before laughing. "Nice office. Dad always said it should have been mine." I didn't answer. He dropped into a chair without permission. "Let's make this simple. You own the company now. I need $50 million. I almost laughed. "You disappear after stealing $83 million. Then ask me for 50 more. He leaned forward. "Because if you don't." He slid a small envelope across my desk. Inside was a photograph. I froze. It showed my mother sitting on a park bench. Someone had clearly been following her. Ryan smiled. "Accidents happen every day. I'd hate for Mom to become one." The room fell completely silent. For years, I had imagined confronting Ryan. I thought I'd be angry. Instead, I felt nothing. No hatred. No fear. Only disappointment. I looked him directly in the eyes. "Do you know the difference between us?" He smirked. "You're about to tell me." I nodded. "When Dad rejected me, I built a future. When life became hard for you, you chose crime." His smile disappeared. I pressed a button beneath my desk. Ryan frowned. "What's that?" Before I could answer, the office door swung open. 2 FBI agents entered. Behind them, 3 U.S. Marshals. One agent held up an arrest warrant. "Ryan Carter. You're under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and extortion." Ryan jumped to his feet. He stared at me in disbelief. "You set me up." I calmly shook my head. "No. You walked into your own trap." The envelope. His threats. Every word he'd spoken had been recorded. As the agents placed handcuffs on his wrists, Ryan looked at our father, who had quietly entered the office moments earlier. "Dad. Tell them this is a mistake." My father didn't move. He simply looked at the son he had always protected. Then, with tears in his eyes, he quietly said, "For the first time in my life, I'm choosing the right son." Ryan's face turned pale. The officers led him toward the elevator. Just before the doors closed, he looked back at me. His eyes burned with hatred. "This isn't over, Ethan." The elevator doors shut. I thought it was the end. I was wrong. Because the very next morning, a lawyer arrived carrying a sealed envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter from Ryan. And one sentence inside that letter changed everything I thought I knew about my family. The envelope H. Add no return address. Only one sentence was written across the front. Read this before you judge me forever. I recognized Ryan's handwriting immediately. My father sat silently across from me. His hands were trembling. I slowly unfolded the letter. Ethan. If you're reading this, then I've already been arrested. You'll think this letter is another lie. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. But there's one truth you've never known. Dad didn't destroy this family first. Grandfather did. I frowned. My grandfather, William Carter, had died when I was 12. Everyone remembered him as a respected businessman. Ryan continued. When Dad was 19, Grandpa forced him to take over the family business. Dad wanted to become an architect. He never got the chance. Grandpa taught him one lesson every day. Weak sons destroy strong families. Love makes men soft. Dad grew up believing that affection was weakness. I stopped reading. My father lowered his head. Tears rolled down his face. It's true, he whispered. My father never hugged me. Not once. If I came second in school, he called me a failure. If I cried, he locked me in the garage until I stopped. The room fell silent. For the first time, I wasn't looking at a cruel father. I was looking at a broken little boy who had never healed. I continued reading. Dad always loved you, Ethan. He was just afraid to show it. He thought making you stronger meant making your life harder. He believed pain creates successful men. I knew that. So I became exactly what he wanted. I praised him. Agreed with everything. Made him believe I was perfect. While I stole everything behind his back. I clenched the paper. Ryan had manipulated our father for years. Not because he loved him, but because he understood him. The last page contained one final confession. There's one more thing you deserve to know. The night Dad disowned you, he came to your apartment. He stayed outside for nearly 2 hours. He wanted to apologize. I told him you had already left the city. I lied. I made sure the two of you never spoke again. I slowly lowered the letter. My heart was pounding. I turned toward my father. Is that true? He nodded without looking at me. I stood outside your apartment with a birthday gift. I wanted to tell you. I was proud of your graduation. I was too late. I believed Ryan. For years, I had believed my father never cared. Now I learned. The chance to reconcile had been stolen before it ever began. Just then, the office phone rang. My assistant answered. A few seconds later, she rushed in, pale and shaken. Mr. Carter. There's been an attack. I stood up immediately. What happened? She swallowed hard. Someone set fire to one of our construction sites. There are injuries. And security cameras caught a man leaving the scene. She placed a tablet on my desk. The footage began to play. A hooded figure climbed into a black SUV. Just before driving away, he looked directly into the camera. Even with the hood, there was no mistaking his face. It was Ryan. But that was impossible. He was supposed to be in federal custody. My father whispered. How? At that same moment, the television in my office switched to breaking news. Breaking news, a federal prison transport carrying Ryan Carter was involved in a violent highway crash. 2 officers were injured, and 1 prisoner escaped. I stared at the screen. Ryan was free. And this time, he had nothing left to lose. The newsroom repeated the same headline every few minutes. Federal fugitive Ryan Carter remains at large. Police checkpoints appeared across the city. The FBI searched airports, train stations, border crossings. But Ryan had disappeared. Again. That night, I stayed alone in my office. Boston glittered outside the window. Yet I couldn't stop thinking about one thing. Ryan wasn't running. He was hunting. The fire at our construction site wasn't about money. It was a message. I'm coming for everything you love. At 2:17 a.m. My phone vibrated. An unknown number. I answered. For several seconds. Only silence. Then Ryan laughed. Congratulations, Mr. CEO. You've won everything. Now let's see how long you keep it. I remained calm. Where are you? Closer than you think. The call disconnected. Seconds later. Every security monitor in my office went black. The building lost power. Emergency lights turned on. Red lights filled the hallway. Then, the fire alarm started screaming. My security chief burst through the door. Mr. Carter. Someone hacked the building. All electronic locks have opened. Employees began rushing toward the exits. In the middle of the chaos, a masked man walked through the lobby carrying a backpack. Security guards ran toward him. He smiled, dropped the bag, and disappeared into the crowd. The bomb squad arrived within minutes. The backpack wasn't filled with explosives. It contained only one photograph. A picture of me, standing beside my father. Across the photo, someone had written in red ink, "You chose him over me." The next morning, my father quietly entered my office. He looked tired. Older. He placed a small wooden box on my desk. I've been carrying this for years. Inside was a faded baseball glove. I recognized it instantly. I had received it on my 10th birthday. Or at least, I thought I had. I found it in the attic last week, my father said. I bought it for you. I wanted to teach you how to play. I frowned. I never got it. He closed his eyes. Ryan told me you threw it away. I believed him. For years. Another lie had separated us. Suddenly, the office television switched to a live press conference. The FBI director stepped to the podium. We have identified Ryan Carter's next target. A map appeared on the screen. It wasn't one of our offices. It wasn't my house. It wasn't the company. It was Boston Children's Hospital. My heart stopped. The hospital was opening a new pediatric wing that afternoon. Our company had donated the building. Hundreds of children, doctors, and families would be there. Ryan wasn't trying to hurt me anymore. He wanted the whole country to watch me fail. Without saying a word, I grabbed my coat. My father stood beside me. For the first time in years, he didn't give me an order. He simply said, "Son, let's stop him, together." I looked into his eyes. The anger I'd carried for so many years hadn't disappeared. But something else had taken its place. Hope. I nodded once. Let's go. Outside, police cars screamed through the streets. Helicopters circled overhead. The race had begun. Because somewhere inside Boston Children's Hospital, Ryan was waiting. And before the day was over, only one brother would walk away free. Police cars raced through downtown Boston. Sirens echoed between the skyscrapers. My father sat beside me in complete silence. For the first time in my life, neither of us had anything left to prove. We only had one goal. Stop Ryan. Boston Children's Hospital was already surrounded by police when we arrived. Families were being evacuated. Doctors carried newborn babies in their arms. Nurses pushed patients through emergency exits. FBI agents rushed toward us. One of them handed me a blueprint. We've searched almost every floor. We still can't find him. I studied the map. Then something caught my attention. The new pediatric wing. It wasn't connected to the main security system yet. I looked at the agent. Check the mechanical level beneath the new building. He stared at me. Why? Because that's exactly where I'd hide. Minutes later, an officer shouted through his radio. "We found him." My heart began pounding. Ryan was underneath the new pediatric wing, standing beside the main electrical control room. If he destroyed it, the backup generators would fail. Life support systems, operating rooms, everything would go dark. Hundreds of children could die. I entered the basement alone. Concrete walls echoed with every step. The lights flickered. Finally, I saw him. Ryan stood calmly beside a control panel. A remote detonator rested in his hand. He smiled. "I knew you'd come." I stopped several feet away. "It doesn't have to end like this." He laughed. "You still think this is about money?" I remained silent. Ryan's eyes filled with anger. It was never about the company. It was always about him. He pointed toward our father, who had just entered with FBI agents. "You finally loves you. And I'm the forgotten son." My father slowly stepped forward. His voice broke. "Ryan. I loved you too." Rhea. And screamed. "No. You loved the version of me that lied to you. You never loved who I really was." For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed. Then my father did something none of us expected. He walked past the FBI agents. Past me. And stood directly in front of Ryan. "If someone has to pay, let it be me." Ryan's hand trembled. "I failed both of my sons. I can never change that. But I won't let another child lose a father because of my mistakes." Tears streamed down his face. "I'm sorry. To both of you." Ryan stared at him. His finger rested on the detonator. Seconds felt like hours. Then, his hand slowly opened. The detonator fell to the floor. He collapsed onto his knees, sobbing. "I just wanted you to see me." Police officers rushed forward. They placed him in handcuffs. This time, he didn't resist. As they led him away, he looked back at me. "I'm sorry, Ethan." I nodded quietly. "I know." 6 months later, Ryan accepted a plea agreement. He was sentenced to many years in federal prison. He also agreed to return every asset he had hidden. The recovered money was used to repay employees, creditors, and victims of his fraud. A year later, Carter Construction officially reopened under a new name, Carter and Hope Foundation. Instead of chasing bigger profits, the company began building affordable housing, schools, and children's hospitals across the country. My father retired. Not as the powerful businessman everyone remembered, but as a volunteer who spent every Thursday reading books to children at the same hospital Ryan had once tried to destroy. One afternoon, he handed me the old baseball glove. This time, we walked into a nearby park together. Without saying much, he tossed me the ball. I caught it, then smiled. Some wounds never disappear completely, but they don't have to define the rest of your life. Sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't making someone suffer. It's becoming the person they never believed you could be.